Great, cool. Do you remember how we met? Do you remember how we had like Twitter?
It was on Twitter. I
It's,
don't remember how, but it was on
it's,
Twitter.
it's pretty crazy that it's that a thing that's happening more and more these days is that people can make friends with other people from around the world. I mean, the
Mhm.
internet has always promised that, but I feel like in the past 3 or 4 years, it's become more and more of a thing that people can make friends with previously strangers online and then
Mhm.
go off to meet other people. Have you? It's just a
Oh, of
crazy.
course, dude. I was on. I started writing and putting it on the internet in 2000.
Yeah, you were like an
So
early
like,
wave
right, right.
Maddox
I was
era.
really early. Yeah. Yeah. Dude, Maddox is a good friend of mine, George Ozunian. He's
Oh
a good friend.
shit!
Yeah. I know him
Ah,
real well.
small world. What's he like in real life? Does he speak like he
He's
talks?
Yeah, he's exactly like you would think he is. He's really smart. He's
Mm.
a complete nerd, very funny. I used to know he's not dating her anymore. He dated this Chinese girl, Cherry, who was just a wonderful human being. She was so nice. And we used to hang out a lot when I lived in LA. He lived in LA too. And me and at that point I was dating a lot of different girls, would hang out with George and his girlfriend. And yeah, he's a smart, fun dude. He's great. Mhm.
Yeah, it's always so nice to hear that people who are kind of prominent, and then you hear that they're good people. Like it's and the opposite is like so tragic, right? When you have a hero of some kind,
That
and
happens a
then
lot, man. That
right,
happens a
it's
lot. Because yeah, I like once you get a level of fame, then you start to meet other famous people. That was one of the big things that happened with me, man. Is like started meeting people that I knew about. I'm like, oh, you're a terrible person. Like I had no idea. That happens an immense amount. Yeah. It used to be true that especially pre-internet, that if you decided to intentionally go seek fame,
Mhm.
there was probably something wrong. Like it didn't mean you were a bad person, but it meant that there
Right.
was something wrong. You know, whereas now it's a very different thing. The world has changed substantially in the last 20, 30 years, and a lot of the old assumptions that are still in people's heads aren't carrying forward. That's probably one of them.
That's interesting. I think there's also a parallel with like I think just wealth in general, or maybe capital of all kinds. So there used to be the idea that if you have wealth, it must probably be from generational looting or conquest, that kind of thing. Whereas
It
now you
depends
can.
where you are. In America, that
That's
was really never the assumption.
right. But even then, there were like, So what's your take on like robber baron kind of early Carnegie,
So
Rockefeller?
it depends. In America, there's always the assumption. Here's the thing: it almost doesn't matter what you do wrong. In
Hmm.
America, if you win, you will be celebrated, right? And
Right.
win can be defined in a lot of different ways. But there are very few things for which winning is not the cure in America, right? Which is definitely not true around the world in many ways. But then also, even like there was an idea for a long time that robber barons were bad people, and it still kind of exists. But it's pretty much always been the thread of either intellectuals or envious. Like there's the most Americans look at rich people as having earned it, as having succeeded, and as having won, right? And
Right.
again, there are a ton of individual exceptions, right? Some
Right.
trust fund kid, like no one likes trust fund kids that act like trust fund kids, right? But like, if you have money in America, the assumption is you did something to earn it and you won, and that there's something inherently good about it. You know,
Hmm.
even if it's wrong, like I can tell you
Right.
plenty of rich people who are terrible people, like,
Right.
who stole all their money and whatever. Like you could have a list, but that's still like it's still the assumption. Trump is a really good example of that.
Right.
He inherited a ton of money, uh, uh, did well enough with it, which is funny. Like if he literally just invested his money in the S&P, he would have made
Right.
more money than, right? But like, and he plays he plays the role of being a successful person pretty well. He's a good actor. And so there's a huge portion of people who are like, who love him and who at least like what he represents, or like that he, at a minimum, he's the enemy of people they hate. One or the
Right.
other.
I think the other thing that has been a little kind of confusing to navigate for me is that, again, so like most of my like the news that I get, I guess, I mean, not just news, but all the correspondence, everything that I hear about America, for example, it's not representative of everybody, and it almost seems like there is no way to get a representative perspective. Like whatever people are talking about on Twitter, for example, it's like it's ahead
Oh
of
no,
some
it's
curve, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it's all messed up. Twitter's like a weird place, dude. Like you would think right now, based on Twitter, that America was burning down and that we're this horrific, racist place where black people can't go outside or they'll just be gunned down and all this, like, which is just not, like, it's just not true. You know, like I live in Austin, which is actually one of the places where the police were the worst.
Right.
And like shooting rubber bullets at pregnant women and horrible stuff, like stuff that just is awful. And here, you can easily exist in the city and have no idea that's going on. None.
Right.
None. Like it was very much contained to a small area of the city. And so, and like, and the views, the views on Twitter about stuff are so extreme, dude. Like most people in America are pro Black Lives Matter, anti-racism, but have like are not absolutely not about defunding police or all this crazy stuff or whatever. Most people are like pretty normal. It's
Right.
just like because most people aren't spending their lives on social media even now.
Yeah.
Like, and if they are, it's Instagram. It's not Twitter.
Yeah, and also it's like and I think this is true for all large countries. Like, and I mean the US probably is the most intense because there's like the media landscape is incentivized to look for whatever, and you know it's a big
Outrage.
country. When you have millions of people in a country, like 300 plus million in the US, it's like every day, you know, like things that have incredibly low probability of happening are guaranteed to
Yeah.
happen. So like every day something terrible happens somewhere and you're gonna see it. And then that news gets sent to everybody. And then
Yep.
it's
Yeah. Well,
crazy.
and then media knows it's stoking outrage, generates clicks, and all that kind of stuff. And then, look, the reality is, it like all places, there are definite awful sociopaths that have power in America, whether it's police departments or media or large corporations. There's terrible people in positions of power. And then the only question is, you know, like how does the spotlight view them, you know?
Yeah.
But
It seems inevitable that it's gonna get worse. So I tend to play the role of an optimist, kind of, you know, trying to, like, what I do on Twitter, for example, is I try to rally people together who are more optimistic and more kind of trying to be constructive. So I have like this little bubble of people who are very supportive and
mhm.
nourishing, blah blah blah.
Yeah, no, I know.
And
I follow you on Twitter. I see your little universe, right?
yeah, so I'm hopeful that, you know, if we have enough people like that, it can kind of spiral out into a positive thing outwards. That's the hope. But I mean, from a realistic point of view, well, what do you think? How does it play
I
out?
mean, so I'm a weird person because I'm short term very pessimistic and long
Right.
term very optimistic, pretty much all the time. Like
Mm.
I like even my co-founder of my company was talking about this the other day that like I'm the weirdest person he's ever met because like if we're talking about tactical day-to-day issues, I'm just like, this person's a failure. They fucked up. This is going terrible. And then we start talking about vision and where we're going. And I'm like, oh my God, everything's amazing. We're gonna do this and
Right.
this. And he's like, I've never seen anyone like that. It makes no sense at all. And that is absolutely the way I feel about America.
Mm.
Um, because I think that's the space we're at. Now, the question about can we shift people to optimism? Maybe, maybe not.
Right.
I'll tell you in America, at least, and I think this is true worldwide, is that what we're seeing overall is this is the very beginning. Well, this isn't the very beginning. We're still in the beginning stages of a complete fracture of all the old systems, right?
Yeah.
Like for post-world, we can go way back, but let's just start really recently. Post-World War II,
Yeah.
the world system was the American system. And post-Cold War, like post-1990, the American system broke because the entire American system was predicated on fighting communism, fighting Russia. There was an enemy, and as long as you were on our side, we were friends, and you had open markets, and you go anywhere in the ocean, and like we paid for all of it, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that 30 years, the only reason it's really continued is because of inertia. And that's all fracturing. And we're about to see a massive shift in a lot of things. And so shit is going to get way worse before it gets better. That's the way it works in any system shift. Things always get worse before they get better. Otherwise, the system wouldn't shift.
That's true.
You know, like, which is what people don't. It's so funny. Like, you see all these people like, oh my God, this is terrible, riots and whatever. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. Riots are terrible. Shooting pregnant women with rubber bullets is terrible. Beating up black people and murdering them is also terrible. And the only way we're getting out of a system that is terrible is going through turbulence. That's just it.
Yeah.
That's how it works. And the problem is, I think that a lot of people don't understand that. They look very short term, but then also they don't even understand what it means to be in a healed state, right? Which is, if you're optimistic, it means that you believe the future can be better than the past.
Yeah.
And most people can't envision that right now.
Right.
And I think the reason ultimately is because not many people are telling very good stories about the future anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and I can think of a lot of amazing futures about the story. Or sorry, stories about the future.
Yeah.
But not many people are. And so that if you want to help people be optimistic, then tell a coherent story about the future that they get and they believe in. And that's that. The rest takes care of itself.
Right. I think what's remarkable is while you're describing this, I can't help but see, parallels between trying to do this kind of big picture systemic narrative shift, and like the same thing happens for individuals when they're going through personal challenges and reorganizing their personal life. I was watching some of your videos earlier, and I saw there's this part where you're talking about how, when you were like, so your kind of critical moment was when your movie was failing, right? And then you said that it would have been easy to delude yourself that, because when you're receiving positive signals in some form, like, and then you kind of get, when you're on the local maxima, and then, the bigger mountain and the smaller mountain thing. And I think that's a very interesting thing that, first of all, not many people even acknowledge it to begin with, that they might be trapped in a local versus global maxima. And then after you acknowledge it, like doing the work and being willing to go through the pain of climbing down before you get to climb up again. I wanted to talk to you a bit more about that experience, because I do hear from, so I get DMs from kids as well, like younger guys who are, it's very funny to receive messages from those guys, because it's like, it's almost a bit schizophrenic. Like, they come to me asking for help, which I am, I'm happy to help.
And then they
can.
deny all your help, and they tell you you're wrong about everything.
Yeah. So it's like, they'll be like, I want to get good. How do I get good? I'm like, okay, you basically got to suck until you get good. And they're like, oh, I don't want to suck though. I don't want to go. Yeah, I just want to get good. Like, tell me how to get good. I'm like, you have to. And then I'm like, I'm kind of torn. Like, I tell them that, yeah, you're going to have a rough time, man, because like, you're going to be stuck in this state until you accept that there is no way out except through it. And I wonder if there's anything better I could say, but it doesn't seem like there is. Right.
Well, so what those young guys haven't done yet is they haven't accepted responsibility for their lives.
Right. Yeah, that seems.
They have a victim mindset. And so they're upset with you because you are not reinforcing their victim mindset. I'm telling you, man, the most important thing, every young person definitely, but especially men.
Yeah.
The best thing you could do is take full, complete responsibility for your own life. And I say especially men. I'll tell you why. Because there's a weird biological thing. A woman doesn't have to accept womanhood. It is thrust upon her.
Right.
Like she has her period at 12 or 13 or whatever, and then she's a woman and that's it. You know, like whether she wants to or not. Same thing,
Right.
which is kind of tracks childbirth, right? Like
Right.
you get pregnant, your body will basically take care of everything. You're going to have to go through childbirth. And whether you want to or not, it's
Right.
happening. It's going, right? Absent other interventions, right? Of course. But
Right.
as a man, you can stay infantile and juvenile forever, assuming you have a social environment that allows that, which is a lot of modernity for
Modern,
men,
yeah,
especially in the
civilization.
West.
Yeah.
But then also, like, you never really, there's no physical or cultural at this point demanded rite of passage. You know,
Right.
like you've got to make your own. And so it's one of the reasons why I think Jews are so successful. Like I'm part Jewish. They're so successful is because they have a very clear rite of passage for men, especially for men, that every Jew around the world goes through. And it's very simple. It's not like that complicated or hard, but
Hmm.
it's like, okay, I'm a man now and I've got to go take responsibility for my life and I've got to go do shit, right? And
Right.
look, you can go through a rite of passage and still not do it. But
Right.
what those guys are doing is they want everything to come without the work. And that just doesn't, that is a childlike mindset, which is fine to have as a child. It does not serve you as a man, as an adult, man or woman.
Right. Yeah. I like this line that you mentioned when you, so again, when you're talking about your movie, you said you could tell a story that was completely true about how it's not your fault. And like every single
Mm-hmm.
thing you say would be true, right? And I like that because it's like it because so often conversations seem to be around like nitpicking and kind of scoring points kind of mindset where if you can find some out, like it's an argumentative game, you can find some
Right.
way to
Mm-hmm.
win that game, but like you're missing out on the bigger truth of like what it is, what the actual situation is. So you can construct your reality in such a way with true facts that present a narrative that's dishonest in a sense, that you're refusing to take responsibility.
Absolutely. And like so many people would rather be right than be effective.
That's true. Yeah, because you get to,
You get to
yeah,
feel, you get that ego boost. You get to feel like, well, I'm right. And if I'm right, I don't have to change. And
right,
change is painful.
right. Yeah, and that's true even when you are in the face of injustice and when you're like
Mm-hmm.
which is very hard to talk about.
Here's the thing I try to explain to people. It doesn't have like, okay, so we did David Goggins' book, My Company, right?
Right,
And like, if you want to talk about someone who has just a horrific past, man, and like the shit he's gone through is like, God, I could never imagine, man.
right,
And we did Tiffany Haddish's as well. She has just gone through, my God, man, it's gut wrenching. The thing that neither of them ever had is a victim mindset.
right,
They always took full, even though like either of them, like whatever arguments you want to make about horrible shit in America or systematic racism, those two can make it, and they can make them all day, and their lives are proof, right? And it's not about race though. Whether it doesn't matter if you're black or white, man or woman, smart or dumb. Taking responsibility for your life is the way that you grow and become who you want. They're just an example because that's like the big conversation in America right now. And like, and here's the thing, you don't have to deny injustice to you. You can say, yeah, this happened. Like, this is terrible and it happened, right? The question is not, did that happen and is it real? The question is, what am I going to do about it?
right.
Right? How am I going to take responsibility? And just like you said, the young guys who message you, they're trying to get someone else to take responsibility for themselves, for them,
Right, right,
right? But everyone I've ever seen who came out of bad situations in any way always took full responsibility for themselves. Always.
that,
Any
yeah,
race, any sex, any creed, always took full. I've never seen anyone who got out of bad situations who blamed other people, who put the responsibility for themselves onto other people. See what I'm saying? Does the
right.
difference make sense?
Yeah, I think another thing that's coming to my mind now is so it's like, so there's the issue of justice and injustice and whatnot, and then there's your personal challenge. And very often for people who are in, however it is that life has screwed you, and life screws everybody to different degrees, right? But like
Mhm.
to get out of the hole that you've been put into, however, whatever reason you are in that hole, to get out of it um, requires an effort that nobody, that an effort that is on the face of it unreasonable. Like it's never fair. It's never
And
fair.
unfair and
Yeah.
unfair. It's unreasonable and unfair. Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, exactly. So everybody who is trying to fight for justice or trying to claw their way out of poverty or abusive household, whatever shit that you're going through, it's not fair. Like, we can say it straight up, like it's just not fair. But then what? Right? Like you can't sit in the fact that it's not fair. Like you can put a flag on your bag or something, but then you have to you can't wait for things to become fair before you move, right? You have to the
If
athlete
you
has to
want to
play her.
change,
Yeah.
if you want to change, you can. But like, it's 100% true. I'm not sure, man. I could tell a story about my life. It's pretty bad in a lot of ways, right? Now, of course, in America, you're like, well, look at these other people. They have it worse. Of course they do, absolutely. And me having a bad or having a sob story or a hard story doesn't deny anyone else's pain. It's not a commentary on their pain.
Right.
It's just my stuff, right? And I can look at other people who are like, man, those people had it way easier than me. Like, man, I can think of some people. I'm like, God, I wish I had your problem. Like, I would give anything for your problem. They're struggling with them.
Right.
That's the way the world is. I'm with
Yeah.
you, right? 100%. The question
Right.
is, what are you gonna do?
Right.
How are you gonna get up and face that?
Yeah. One of the a funny thing that I realized was that again, a thing that people will often not like, if you start talking about this, it sounds weird, but I think it's true that some of the most depressed people in the world are like children of billionaires, or like people born in wealthy families. And the
Mhm.
fact that the moment you say that, people are going to be like, what the fuck? That's like, they're the most privileged, they're the most wealthy and whatever. Like, but there's all these issues, right? Like their
They're the most
parents.
screwed up people I've ever met. All the most screwed up people I've ever met came
Yeah.
from a massive wealth and abundance. All of them.
Right, because their parents don't even fully see them as like like, they are like investments slash like estate, right? Like what they do is they get put through that lens. They can't trust their friends because their friends are only friends with them because their friends might only be friends with them because they're rich, and they don't have the skills and perspectives. I mean, so hypothetically, they have to take responsibility for their life like everybody else, but like it's funny to face, like, so I think when I was reflecting on, like, when I first started work and I was thinking like, oh, I got a mortgage and I have bills to pay and I don't have much money and I'm kind of like grumpy and upset about it, the idea that someone wealthier than me might be more miserable than me
You
seemed,
couldn't imagine it.
yeah, like, I mean, so
Almost
I would,
offensive, probably.
yeah, and I would meditate on that, like there's probably some guy there's definitely some guy who's wealthier than me and has none of the problems that I'm currently facing, but his problems are choking him to the point where he is suicidal. It's like, which
I
is
know
real.
those people who've killed themselves. Yes, I
Right.
know them.
And yeah,
100%.
and part of why that is because nobody will sympathize with them or see their stories as valid. And but then again, it's like, all we can do as individuals is, okay, you hear whatever stories and you know what's going on, and then the only thing you actually have control over is your own life and your own, like, how you spend your day and where you give your time and energy and money and whatnot. So it's even when talking about this, like this itself, like, you can kind of wonder if like literally any conversation about anything can cross some threshold where, if so now we're having this conversation the first time and we're interacting, but like if every week we start meeting up and having the same conversation, that becomes its own form of like avoidance or escape from
Of
whatever it is
course.
that our issues are,
Absolutely.
which is,
Mhm.
again, it's a constant vigilance is required. I just remembered another one of my questions that I had for you, which was, so you mentioned that you went through like 4 years of psychotherapy. Was that it? Or like,
Going 4 times a week.
right? That's like 200 times 4 years. That's like 800 times of sessions.
Probably, yeah. Mhm.
I'm curious about. So would you say there were multiple thresholds that you had to cross for that, or was it somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, of
What's
course.
the
No,
experience
it,
like?
it was So, well, okay. So psychoanalysis, any
All
form of
right.
talk therapy, the benefit of it is that it helps you really think about your emotions and understand them. But the detriment is that it only really helps you think about them, right? And so, like, the way I like to talk about it is the map versus the territory, right?
Right.
Like, there's a difference between having a map of Manhattan and walking the island, right?
Right.
And so, what what therapy did for me is help me get a really good, like, I started off with no map and having never been to the island, and then therapy helped me develop a really great map of Manhattan, and then maybe like I walked around one neighborhood like Wall Street or something, like
Right.
a tiny piece, and that's it. So I felt a little bit in there, but very little. And then, but that's why I stopped, is because I realized, like exactly what you said a few minutes ago, I was having a lot of the same conversations over and over,
Right.
and I was going at the same issues again. And my therapist, who had been great for about 3 years, 3.5 years, wasn't helping me get like past get to the next level and
Right.
get to where I needed to go. And I didn't really realize it until later, but looking back, it's real clear. The problem was I wasn't feeling any of my emotions,
Right.
which is like that's what I call walking the territory, right?
Right.
And so I needed something or someone or something different in order to get to a place where I could feel all this. Because knowing it, it made me better and I understood a lot more and I was way better off than when I knew nothing. But it was like, it's like, like a map of Manhattan, you don't get the real experience of Manhattan. It's just a map, even Google Maps, which is great. It's nowhere
Right.
near the same thing as walking the city.
Right. That's reminding me of so I had a I used so my version of that was I would journal like introspective journaling intensely for years, day after day. So I had like a project where I wanted to write 1 million words just to become a better writer and to just get sheer volume of output. And I noticed that again, like same issue where now after the first 300 400,000 words, you start repeating yourself because this you need new things to do. You need to have done new things to encounter new. Anyway, one of the concepts that I came up with that was useful to me, and ironically, was that even after I came up with the concept, it's so meta. The concept is that it's the idea of a truth in a box. So it's a thing that you know to be true. So maybe it's something like maybe it's something like I tend to avoid conflict, right? That's a truth that you know intellectually. And then having written it down, it's now in a box that you can check on it like every month or whatever. Every so often, when you go, you had a fight with somebody and you avoided the conversation, and then you go back and you reflect and like, oh yeah, I tend to avoid this thing. And then you feel satisfied that you understand what happened, and then you forget about it, and it repeats. The cycle repeats again and again. And then I
Yep.
remember reading about, and this seems unrelated, but it's related. I remember reading about how so when like electricity became a widespread thing, like so in the like steam era of industrialization, and then there's electricity was introduced. It took about 50 years to transition from like steam powering industries like in factories and stuff to electricity, even though it was known that electricity was superior, because the existing factory was already kind of optimized for steam, and like you can't just
Yep.
swap out the thing. You got to re-architect the
Yeah.
whole thing from scratch, like from zero. Like you got to tear down the whole thing and start from scratch, and that's just way too much effort and way too like it can't be done overnight. It takes like a years, I guess, and like so it took 50
Yeah.
years for the thing to transition.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've been geeking out, I guess, a bit, and trying to face that regularly, which is that just because you know something is better or something is true doesn't mean you're going to do anything about it. And you have, and like the the and I'm reminded of another quote from like a lumberjack, where some guy tells a lumberjack like, hey, I can help you, chop wood twice as well with like these methods and ideas. And the lumberjack's like, son, I even now I don't chop wood half as well as I already know how to do. Right. So it's like, and I found that to be very true for my experience and for everyone I
It's
talk
not
to.
information.
Right? Everyone already knows. Yeah, everyone already knows what they need to do. Everyone, like you said with another one of the videos, you're talking about like people asking, how do I gain weight or how do I put on muscle mass, right? And you're like, lift the weights. It's just pick it up and
It's
put it
pretty
down.
simple.
Everything else is,
Yep.
yeah. So it seems to me that then, it's kind of, then I have to sit back and be like, okay, we spent all this time trying to share information, but information is not the bottleneck. The bottleneck is like courage. The bottleneck
Wow.
is, right?
That's the question: is why don't people change when they know they should?
Yeah.
Right. And I'll tell you, man, that was a big question for me for a long time, for myself and for other people. Right. And the answer, I think, boils down to this might sound a little extreme, but it's where I am in this thought process right now. Right. And I could change later, but I think the answer boils down for most people to trauma.
Yeah.
Right. Most people don't change because they either don't believe they can, they don't believe they're allowed to, or they're afraid of what the change would do. Right. So you could say fear, but I think beneath the fear is trauma.
Interesting.
For most people,
I usually
not
settle
everybody.
on fear.
Yeah.
What informed your perspective?
Trauma, like, we're doing my own work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing my own emotional work, man. After I stopped talk therapy, I started doing psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. So MDMA assisted psychotherapy and mushrooms and LSD and that stuff. And again, all therapeutic setting with trained professionals. It's illegal, but you can still find people in America who do it. Really, really good people who've been doing it for a long time. And it's not cheap, but you can find it. And like, dude, it was game changing for me. And then it was like my whole life opened up. It was like I was already very successful before, but I knew my B- is a lot of other people's A+. And I don't mean that arrogantly. It's just I don't mean that in everything. Definitely not in sports, right? But like in writing and other things. I can mail stuff in that I know is garbage for me, and other people think it's amazing. And I realized I was doing this, right? And I was selling myself short. And a lot of that was trauma, whether it was childhood stuff or stuff that happened in my adulthood or whatever. Stuff happened to me, or I created things that were painful. And then I orchestrated a life to avoid that pain. Right. Instead of realizing, no, hold on. Like, by avoiding that pain, I'm also avoiding all the joy that comes with it. A really good example is writing and publishing stuff. Like, I wrote 4 books that at this point have sold over 3.5, close to 4 million copies, and made tens of millions of people around the world laugh, right? And enjoy themselves. And I stopped. And a big part of it was I stopped that phase of my life. Okay, fine. But I stopped all writing for like 5, 6, 7 years, basically all writing. And there's no good reason other than all of the shit that I had to deal with and endure because my writing wasn't amenable to certain people and their social beliefs. And I didn't even admit that to myself until like a year or 2 years ago, that like, oh shit, I was holding myself back and making myself small for no other reason than because I wanted to avoid this pain that I went through. Right. And if I want to keep doing that, okay, fine, that's a different decision. I wasn't even admitting it to myself. And so now it's like, oh, dude, as soon as I did that, the floodgates opened. I have 3 books going right now. Nice. And I have all kinds of stuff that's like flowing out of me. And I'll probably write another 10 or 20 books in my life. I may not have ever come back. Right. Had I not done that work. You know what I'm saying? Right. I mean, there's a reason that Harper Lee never wrote another book after, she did, but like 40 years later, or that, Ralph Ellison never wrote another book after Invisible Man, and maybe a different reason than me. They had the pressure of high expectations or whatever, but it's still fear, and it's still that comes from a trauma that's unaddressed. Yeah. One of my riffs is success can be very dehumanizing, right? And then you have to. It is. It's like and which is funny for me because I remember when I was a bit younger, the idea that people might be afraid of success sounded like excuses. Crazy talk. Yeah, right? It sounds crazy talk. Like it's just, it sounds like bullshit. It sounds like something that you're saying that you're afraid of. It's like at a job interview and they ask you what's your weakness and you say, oh, I work too hard, right?
Like, oh, I'm not scared of failing. I'm just scared of being successful. But then having grown through, and my milestones are relative to my journey, but like, it's like when you cross the threshold, you can't go back, like in a certain permanent way, right? And you've definitely experienced that, right? Actually, I want to like my out for selfish reasons, I want to ask, what has your experience been? Just navigating that kind of there must have been some moment where you realized that there's no going back, and was there like a grief or like a kind of a there's always there's information that you kind of have, but it's not embodied, where that, oh, once I whatever. Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah. No, there wasn't really, because, and I'll tell you, the God's honest truth is,
Right.
the only reason I became big is because I had to. Like for me, like, and that was probably my unconscious. Like I had gotten fired from being a lawyer in a very public way. Like I was ostracized from the law profession, and then my dad fired me from the family business. And so it was like, it was almost like my subconscious had been like, all right, I'm going to fuck you up at everything you try until you go do the thing you're supposed to do, you know? And then once I started, it was like, shit just took off, dude. It was like, but there was, for me, there was no grief about anything left behind.
Right.
But there was definitely a moment where I realized, like, oh shit, my life will never be the same. And not that I didn't grieve for what I was leaving, because it wasn't that good. Right. But there was definitely, you said it before, success dehumanizes you. There was a moment where I remember it very clearly. I was doing a book signing in a bookstore in Tampa. And I was pretty big at this point, but I was still relatively early. So like there were only maybe 200 or 300 people at this signing instead of thousands, right? Right. And I'll never forget the way this girl looked at me. She looked at me the way the image I got in my head was like a dog looking at a treat. You know, it was so focused on, and you know how dogs are just pure, right? Right. And and the feeling, I'll never forget it. I remember it because I ignored it and pushed it away. But like, I got a deep feeling that, oh God, I'm not a person to these people. Right. Right. Which was like really wounding to me in a deep way, because like I put so much effort into my art, and I thought it was like a unilateral relationship, and it's not, man. These people have deep, meaningful relationships with me that have nothing to do with me at all. Like, and if I can't tell you how many people I met. It took me years to accept this. I would meet people who were like fans, and they would like not like me as a person, and be very disappointed with who I was as a person. I'm like, how can you be disappointed with me? This is me. And then it took me, I just fought it for years until I realized, oh, right, their relationship is with their projection of me, not with me. I love this. Just accepting that was like, oh, dude, I fought that for years. That's just part of the game.
Right. I love that you're saying this, because this is like, again, I have like one of my folders in my life is like fame studies, like just to understand, because it goes through everything, and it's like, it's one of the most visible things in the world. Like literally, like, so famous people are the most visible people in the world. What happens to them is highly visible. And yet, while it's right in the open, like it feels like we are in collective denial about the situation, which is like, so again, with a lot of like musical artists, for example, a lot of them literally, they get to where they are because they are very sensitive, vulnerable people. Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, they bear their feelings and their soul and whatnot, and they do that, and then they get they basically get punished with the rewards, which is that they get this this adulation and pedestalization. Like they started writing music because they felt like they weren't being heard, or they weren't being understood. And maybe there's like this nice like time period where the fans are great and whatnot, and then you hit like the ramp, and then once you hit the ramp, it's like you're not human anymore, and the crowd is this entity beyond your what you can conceive of, and
they won't let you change. Like Eminem's like this. Eminem became Eminem because of all of his problems and all the whatever issues and this and that, and neither his fans nor him want him to change, because it got him there. But that's not how humans work. That's not how the soul works. And so you can tell, like, you can see through his music, the struggle. and
Yeah.
how hard it is for him to try and hold on to the past without holding on to it and change it, but you can't do it. You've got to let go. It's why Bob Dylan is Bob Dylan, right? Because he throws everything out from the past and does something
Right.
totally new each and every
Right.
time.
Right.
You know, and because he's actually trying to change and grow as an artist. He might be even going a little extreme, but oh no, dude, it's
Yeah.
no one talks about this. No one
Right.
understands this, and I'll tell you why. Once you get famous, you go into this little club. You kind of do go into a club, not really,
Right.
literally. There isn't like
Yeah.
the famous house in LA,
Yeah.
but like once you become known, other famous people reach out to you and want to hang out. And the reason I couldn't understand why at first, man, especially when I was in LA, because I hated all those people, man. Like I go down the list of like very famous people, you know, most of them suck as people. And if they don't suck, then they're just so shallow and they're just like, especially in LA, like that's the worst.
Right.
And then I realized why they all hang out. It's like, oh, because they're the only people who can understand each other's
Yeah.
problems.
Right.
They're the only ones. Like they're the only ones who can understand what it's like to go to Whole Foods and have like this happen. It used to happen to me all the time. I'd be in Whole Foods and some young kid will come up to me. He's like, dude, Tucker Max, I love your books or blah, blah, blah. I'm like, thank you, whatever. He's like, and he'll look at me. He's like, why aren't you like drunk, yelling curses at people, like laying under the table, pissing yourself? And I'm like, it's 11 a.m. on Tuesday, you idiot. Like, what the fuck's wrong with you?
Right.
But like, they can't conceive of you as a human. You are just a thing to them.
Right.
And so no one else gets it. So that's why they all hang out. That's why they all come together. And that's one of the reasons I was like, man, I don't want this. Like, not necessarily I don't want fame. It's more like I don't want these to be my people. I don't want this to be my reality, you know, because I don't like any of them.
Right.
And like, or at least the ones I hung out with, because God knows, it's not like I hung out with every famous person. I didn't.
Yeah.
But a bunch. That probably ones you would think would be really fun and cool. And I was like, ugh, get away. Oh, dude, man, the worst. All right, I would love to keep talking about this. I got a heart out though, man. I gotta go. Like I'm actually late for another call. So you got the link. If you want to schedule another time to talk, I'm happy to. We can keep going on the fame stuff. All right.
Right. This is
totally up to you.
Okay. I'll look through this and see if I have any like follow-up questions and stuff. But I think this is great.
Okay.
Thanks, man. Thank you so much.
Awesome, man.
Right.
See you, brother.
Take care.